In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern. There is some massive cooldowns on the way, also some more major storms crossing the nation with potential for severe weather and some wintry weather, some late season wintry weather. There is plenty of things to talk about in today's video as we transition into a very interesting time of the year. I just want to tell you guys a feeling I've been having. I don't know if this means anything, but for some reason I just feel like we're gonna have an active hurricane season. That's not really going based off of anything. It's just a feeling that I have for some reason. But we'll see what ends up happening with that. I am excited to talk about the hurricane season coming up. We have some very big news coming up. Actually, we're going to be using brand new maps, very high definition. They're going to look a lot better than they ever have. They're going to work a lot better than they ever have, and I'm really looking forward to it, to showing you guys that. That's coming up in the coming weeks. We need to start talking about the hurricane season and what that looks like. So let me know down below if you're looking forward to those videos, if that's something that interests you. That way I know how many of those I need to make, because I can certainly make quite a bit of them, or I can make it a pretty sparse thing, depending on what you guys enjoy. Enough blabbering on, let's go ahead and just get into it. We reached the high temperatures of today, the afternoon, and we get this look of the jet stream doing about like this. And as you can see, it really tapers off here. This is probably going to be very calm conditions along the east, very cold and calm conditions. When this jet stream kind of like splits like that and becomes very sparse, we get very calm. And when we see these tight areas of a lot of these lines in there, that is going to be where things are very volatile as far as winds and storminess. But when it spreads apart like this, you get just extremely calm conditions typically. We can see there's a pretty major storm taking place across the northwest. We see the precipitation here for areas of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, some of these very western provinces of Canada there. I want to start including Canada a lot more as well these days, so that is a goal of mine as well. We can see it for the Gulf states and the southeast states. We do have this tropical moisture moving in. This is part of the reason why I'm kind of gearing towards talking about the tropics, is the tropics seem to be having an earlier start than normal. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a very active season, but it's a sign that we could be seeing some early activity. We do see this is organizing into a very weak low, and this could bring some windiness and some flooding, as that has a lot of that Gulf moisture involved with it. As you can see, we still have this very ridge look in this pattern. It's kind of working like this actually, which is interesting, because usually you see, you know, this type of a look, and there is a little bit of that, but a lot of this is coming from the west. And then we see this push down here in the northwest, and this is starting to bring the imbalance to the whole pattern. This thing is going to get forced to the east since we have this type of a flow with the winds, so it's going to get forced eastward basically. And that was Wednesday the 12th. Here's Thursday the 13th. We can see a 1,006 millibar low pressure center, and basically all of this Gulf moisture is bringing precipitation to Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, many different states seeing some moisture from this. It gets forced eastward there, as you can see, and this is where that Gulf moisture is by this point. This is Friday into Saturday, so the 14th into the 15th, and by this point we also have another very interesting feature happening, but we do need to backtrack a little bit. We have this major low developing as a 987 millibar low pressure center here in eastern Colorado. You can see some wintry weather here for Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming there. And then we can see a little bit of a cold front, warm front dynamic that wants to take place here. We're going to have to see how this one develops, but this is our next major severe weather threat. As it moves into Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, we do have some pretty broad low pressure in here. Primarily, the most of the low pressure is in this area here, so between Oklahoma and Kansas. This is exactly the setup that we had a couple of weeks ago with those back-to-back severe weather outbreaks. This one does not look quite as bad, in my opinion, at this point, but that can change. But that doesn't mean that bad things won't happen, so that's why we have to pay very close attention. Now, this low kind of transfers to the north. I think part of the reason why I don't think it looks as bad is because it's just not getting its act together. It's never becoming super organized. And even by this point, I mean, try to make out where these frontal boundaries are. I mean, there's hardly a warm front, but there is some colder air forcing its way in behind, and this is a bit of a cold front underneath. We still have that surging warm air, so this will be enough to cause certain levels of severe weather to happen in there in between this. I just don't know the severity of that at this point. So let's keep going, and this is going to be by the time we're reaching Sunday the 16th here. By this point, the low is looking a lot more organized. Northern Michigan here, we see this warm front doing something like this. Cold front's doing something like this. And you can tell that right around this area would be where the threat is. So from Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, down through Mississippi, Georgia, Florida Panhandle, these areas would be the area to watch. And look at this Arctic blast coming in behind. It certainly is an Arctic blast. There was a lot of people yesterday saying it's not an Arctic blast. It's, going to be 40s or 50s, not, single digits. But really the definition of an Arctic blast is that there's Arctic air blasting into the United States. If it had to be 10 to 20 degrees for it to be considered an Arctic blast, it would just be called 10 to 20 degree blast. It wouldn't be called an Arctic blast. This is an Arctic air mass that is being forced down from high up in Canada, and it is forcing its way down into the United States. So by all logical terms, this is a Arctic blast. And as you can see, it's less far stretching at this point. I want to show where this impacts the East Coast real quickly. We see 992 here, warm front doing this, cold front doing this. When you see this type of an S curve, it's not a good sign. We do see the cold front doing about like this, so you still have the warm air surging to the east, cold air really blasting in behind it, a very intense look, and we would be potentially looking at some severe weather, if not at least thunderstorms for these areas along that cold front here. So definitely thunderstorms will be a possibility Sunday into Monday here. And then for Monday, during the high temperatures, this should all but be moved out, but we could tell very intense Arctic blast. Matter of fact, it's so intense that Wisconsin, Michigan, these areas near the Great Lakes are seeing snowfall potentially from this. So we'll need to watch that closely as you're on the backside of that Arctic blast. It's very, very intense. And we even see some of this lake effect snowfall reach into states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. This is pretty late in the season to be seeing this, and this model is definitely indicating that that will be the case. Now, by the time we're reaching the high temperatures on Wednesday, we do get a little bit of a nor'easter here, but things are just a little bit too warm to turn into any sort of a snowstorm. But we could be seeing some winds, some heavier rainfall from that, and some snow mixing in depending on where you're at. But as far as a widespread snowfall, it's just a little too late here. Now, for Thursday here, the 20th, what's interesting is we do see the warm air pushing back and kind of beginning to take hold. But we get this storm across the central United States again. So potentially, if something can get organized in here, this would be our next severe weather outbreak threat that we really need to watch later in April. All of this stuff is going to be what we're tracking, so we're really going to be watching this closely for you guys. I think another interesting thing is there does appear to be another kind of like round of Gulf moisture here in the Gulf and in the Caribbean, which is just so amazing to me this time of year. But this is what we're truly dealing with. It's very crazy stuff. Let's go ahead and take a look at the total precipitation here. As you can see, nothing really in the east hits twice for any given area. So we get this storm moving up like this. We get this nor'easter that develops in here. That brings a lot of that precipitation in these areas. And then we get a lot of the Gulf moisture here. And that's what brings it to these areas here. And then we do get multiple storms moving through the northwest, and these are the areas where we see the most precipitation actually because multiple storms flowing through. But these are the main storm tracks that we're seeing in here. In the reds, obviously we're dealing with like 2 to 5 inches of rainfall over the next 10 days, which is a significant amount. So those red areas, those yellow areas are mainly where we're watching for the most activity. Anywhere in the greens and blues is looking at pretty minimal activity, potentially even below average precipitation, depending on how much you average. So it does depend on where. Obviously, for Southern California, this gray and green area is going to be pretty much above average precipitation. But for areas like Texas and Louisiana here, this is going to be, not that much, obviously, especially here in the Gulf states. So it does vary depending on where you're at. Now, the total snowfall here, as you can see, out in the mountainous west, no surprise that we're expecting snowfall still. That should continue for a few weeks at least. But I think for the Great Lakes here, right here, this is the most surprising piece of snowfall that we're seeing. I mean, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, potentially feet of snowfall, even maybe 10 inches there in the Lower Peninsula. So very, very interesting areas seeing snowfall here. Certainly a very, very fascinating thing as we reach later into April, still seeing these impacts. Now this is going to be basically our ensemble model temperature anomalies here. We can see there is some cold air in the southeast there. This is going to move into average territory as we reach just into today. So very close to average, these lighter blues and lighter yellows. This is going to be near normal. And then as we reach into tomorrow, Wednesday the 12th, the further north you go here in the east and central United States, the more above normal temperatures you're seeing. This Gulf energy that is here with that tropical activity is certainly cooling things down a little bit for you folks there in the south, but these areas are dealing with very far above normal temperatures once again. That's going to last into Thursday as well. Even Friday, Saturday, Sunday there, you can see for the eastern seaboard, we still have by Sunday the 16th very warm temperatures. After this point though, here is that pretty major pocket of cold air. It's going to be brief, but this model is pretty it's kind of can't make up its mind here with the intensity of this. If we were to look at let's say the European actual model, and as we see here, it should look a lot more intense. Yeah, so these areas here in the north, central and northeastern United States areas here and here, these areas in the greens are looking at 10 to 15 degrees below normal, and these blues within the greens that have a little bit more of a purplish tint, that's going to be 15 to 25 degrees below normal. As you can see underneath, we still have these warm temperatures moving through. It's mostly to the north, so this is a pretty interesting setup, and that does start to come to an end here towards around the 20th 21st time frame, but it shouldn't be fully over by that point. But that is when things will be kind of wrapping up and potentially moving into a warmer pattern, especially as you look west, kind of upstream here. We have this negative looking P&A that's trying to set up as this cold air is surging southward. This should set off a bit of a warm ricochet where these warm temperatures move northward here to kind of fill in the gap. So that is what we expect at this point. Be sure to subscribe. We're going to update you guys on all of these things every single day as we always do. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to also like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I will see you guys in the next video.